All right. Well, welcome to our DFS Dash seminar today. We're going to be discussing MLB DFS. It's one of my favorite DFS sports, and it didn't start that way. It actually was one of my least favorite DFS sports until I learned how to play it and understood that there was a lot of money to be made at the game. Uh, MLB DFS is one of those sports that gets a bad rap. A lot of people will tell you that it's a high variance sport. They'll tell you it's not a very predictable sport. It's a very frustrating sport. But honestly, I think it's probably one of the most exciting DFS sports there is. There's nothing more intense than being in a position where you're at the end of the night and your guy's up in the bottom of the ninth, and a home run's the difference between tens of thousands of dollars. And unfortunately, when you do get in that situation, more often than not, it doesn't hit the home run, but it's still a really exciting and intense experience. Um, so why baseball DFS? Why would you ever want to play this crazy game? Well, first of all, it has the highest statistical correlation of any sport in DFS. There are lots of every sport in DFS has various stats that are used, and people make models for every sport. And people just get to absurd lengths when it comes to the depth of their models, the depth of the sports they take. But no sport has more correlation than baseball. And the reason for that is this point number two is that it's got the lowest number of variables of any sport. If you think of a sport like basketball or football, these team sports, at any one time, there's anywhere from 12 to, in some sports like NASCAR, 40 or 45 people who have an immediate and instant impact on what's going on. Even in a basketball game with 10 people on the court, every single person has their own mindset, their own decision-making process, things they're doing on the court, abilities, talents that are interacting with each other. And baseball is the only sport, other than maybe golf, where the number of people involved in a particular player are very limited. In baseball, you've got the pitcher and the batter, and those are the only two that are really duking it out. Once the ball goes in play, you do have the fielders, but a fair amount of what happens on that play is determined between the pitcher and the batter, and so we have stats that have very high correlation with pitchers and batters that help us determine which spots a hitter is going to succeed in, which spots a pitcher is going to succeed in, and you don't have all of these outlier events like you do in a sport like basketball or football, where one person can take off and really change the entire layout of a slate. Just imagine with NBA again, with it coming to an end here, all it takes is one shooting guard who's not in a great spot just coming in and having an on-fire day and hitting a bunch of three-pointers to take away usage from the other four guys on the team, and now all your projection models are just blown out of the water. So even though baseball is a sport where hitters are only going to be successful about one-third of the time, determining when and how that one-third happens is more accurate in baseball than any other sport. Another reason I love baseball DFS, it's a very easy sport to be contrarian in. Again, in other sports, it's very hard to contrarianize because once you start getting into the 2%, 1%, half percent owned plays, the ceilings are really limited. And so it really becomes almost a lottery ticket to take some of these super low owned guys and hope that they really go off, because you just can't often enough take a half percent owned guy in basketball or in football and expect them to have these monster games. Baseball's different. One, because there's a wider range of plays that are viable plays for any given slate, and two, because anybody can come out and run into one essentially and hit a home run. People do it all the time. Pitchers do it. Bench guys do it. Guys that you would never expect to hit home runs can hit home runs, and a home run can majorly impact the slate. The home run equivalent in other sports is a ceiling that a lot of players can't hit. And so the range of players, or the number of players that can hit that ceiling that can impact a slate or give you a chance to win a slate, is a lot higher. And so I like it because it gives you more variety and flexibility. You can roster a wider range of players and not feel like you're putting guys in who have no chance of scoring like you do in other sports. And then lastly, you get more slates in baseball than any other sport. Not only is it a 162 game season, which is crazy, but you'll find out in DFS a lot of these days, like Monday, you'll get day games and evening games. And so you can actually get a nice 6 or 7 game day slate and a nice 6 or 7 game evening slate that are both very viable slates in one day. And that's a lot of fun. I mean, if you've ever played basketball and 30 minutes into the night, one of your guys gets injured, and now your entire day is wrecked, and you got to wait till tomorrow to play again. Baseball, you're going to get chances to do that. You're going to get split days. You're going to get smaller slates in between the split days. And so, because there's more slates in baseball than any other DFS sport, if you can master this sport, there's a lot of money to be made. And that's why we're going to take this next hour and a half here, and we're gonna learn this sport and get it down so we can rock it out. So let's just take a look at scoring really quick. And I've got the 4 main sites that we cover here up here, and the scoring is relatively similar, but I want to highlight a few things. We'll start over here with DraftKings. Singles run at 3 points, doubles 5, triples 8. Home runs 10, and you'll see here in the parentheses 14. The reason I've got that there is because RBIs and earned runs are 2 points each. And so when you hit a home run, you get credit for batting a run in, which is yourself, and you get credit for the run scored, which is yourself. So technically it's a 14. Walks and hit by pitches are 2 points. Stolen bases are 5 points. On the pitching side, every inning your pitcher gets is 2.25 points. In baseball, they do a thing called third innings, and basically every out is a third inning. So if your pitcher's into the 5th inning and they get one guy out in the 5th inning and then they get pulled, that's basically 4 1/3 innings, which here would be 2.25 times the 4, and then you'd get 0.75 for that 1/3 inning. So they do pay out in partial innings. Strikeouts count for 2 points. If the pitcher gets the win, that's 4 points. If you're not a baseball expert, in order for a pitcher to get the win, he must be in the lead when he leaves the game. He must have pitched a minimum of 5 innings, and his team must not surrender the lead before the end of the game's over. If any of those things happen, the win goes to one of the other pitchers. So it's not just, you pick the pitcher and that team won. They got to be in the lead when the pitcher leaves. He's got to go a minimum of 5 full innings, and then they need to retain the lead for the remainder of the game. It's trickier to get than you would think. And then there's negative points, unfortunately. Every earned run can cost you 2 points, and on DraftKings specifically, every hit, walk, or hit by pitcher essentially is minus 0.6 points. This can be incredibly frustrating. Will be times where your pitcher will come out and he'll throw 6 innings of gem baseball and get 7 or 8 strikeouts. And then give up 7 runs because the coach didn't pull him soon enough. And that's a very aggravating situation. It does happen, but it doesn't happen very often. And that's why when it comes to pitching, strikeouts are a big key. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but you're really going to want to target high strikeout pitchers because that helps boost your floor and it helps offset any runs you're going to be losing in earned runs. Looking at the other side, scoring is pretty similar. FanDuel essentially, if you want to look at it, I mean, you could say, well, they blow up doubles and triples and home runs are worth more. Really, they just devalue singles a little bit because everything else is on a doubled scale. Times 2 for the double, times 3 for the triple. You can see for the home run, it really pays up to 18.7 when you factor the runs and RBIs. But it's pretty much a similar scale. One thing they did different this year, they've actually brought the value of a win down to 6 points, and they give you credit for a quality start now for an additional 4 points. And I kind of like this because, again, wins are somewhat out of the pitcher's control. Sometimes you'll roster your Clayton Kershaw or your Madison Bumgarner, and they'll be up 3-0 in the 7th inning, and then the bullpen will come in and give up 3 runs, and you lose the win, and it's really frustrating. And so they've actually taken what used to be a 10 points for a win. They've split it down here, and so now if your pitcher can go at least 6 innings and get under 4 earned runs, then he's going to get credit for the quality start and get 4 of those 10 win points regardless. Another thing to point out with FanDuel, they don't actually dock you for hits and walks and hit by pitches. So your pitchers are going to have an even safer floor in FanDuel. You're going to find out with cash games, especially, you're always going to be paying up for pitchers, but more so on FanDuel than any other site. You really can lock in a safe floor here because of the fact that this is the only site where they don't take off for hits and walks. Fantasy draft, they love to copy DraftKings. That's what they do. You'll find out their salaries are almost identical, except they're divided in half. And of course, it's no surprise their scoring's the same. The one thing they do add is they have a caught stealing rating for -2 points. So it's just something to keep in mind a little bit as you're picking players. If you pick a guy that's an aggressive base stealer, you can lose a little bit of points here and there. But most times, base stealers are going to get you more upside with the 5 points than downside with the caught stealing. So it's not something you have to overly stress out about. And then Yahoo, for some strange reason, says, hey, fantasy sports is better when we use decimal points. I don't know why. It's really stupid to me, but we can't be 2 points per single. It's got to be 2.1 and 4.2 and 6.3. But the ratios are pretty similar here. Again, there's not really enough difference in these things that you really have to get caught up in. Well, I need a triples expert on this site, and I need a home run expert on this site. They're all pretty balanced and pretty similar. The main thing I would just pay attention to is the quality start on FanDuel. All the sites have various small bonuses for things like no-hitters and whatnot, but those things, if you can predict no-hitters, you don't need to be watching this video or in this class because you've already kind of got that whole thing down. So that's the kind of the gist of MLB scoring. Any questions on that, guys? If not, we will move on. All right, Evan says that FanDuel doesn't have the pitcher bonuses. They used to. They must have taken those out, and I just didn't catch it. So let's go over some key stats that are going to make you successful when it comes to DFS. The first one I want to talk about is called WOBA, and it's basically weighted on-base average. The way this statistic works is it takes something like a batting average, and it weighs each event separately that can happen in an at-bat based on their ability to score runs. And so essentially we know that in a regular batting average, if a guy is batting 300, it means he's getting 3 hits for every 10 at-bats that he has. But batting average isn't really a good predicative stat for fantasy purposes because not all hits are created equal. As we just looked at on the scoring, a double's worth more than a single, a triple's worth more than a double, so on and so forth. So somebody invented this really cool statistic called WOBA. And what it does is it weighs walks, hit by pitches, singles, doubles, triples, home runs, all separately, and uses them to create an average that actually is weighed towards more accurately towards fantasy scoring. And so it's really a great stat for us because it's way more fantasy relevant. It's one of the few statistics that factors that in and allows us to get something that's weighted towards the fantasy points we're going to be scoring, which paints a much better picture for us. As you can see on the chart here, the WOBA chart down here, awful. 290 is a WOBA that's awful, and then it goes all the way up to 400, which is excellent. The numbers actually range much wider than that. You'll find situations where guys have WOBA splits that are upwards of 450, 500, and sometimes depending on the sample size. You'll also find guys down in the low 200s. Generally speaking, though, we are looking, especially on any regular size slate, for stuff that's about 350 or higher. Because those are the guys that are going to be in a position to put up some fantasy points, to have some kind of a floor. I mean, obviously, in any baseball game, every player's floor is 0. And pitchers, it's actually negative because of the negative points. But generally speaking, when we get guys who have WOBA's splits of 350 or higher, we can feel pretty good that they're in a spot where they're going to produce some fantasy scoring. Over here, you can kind of see the weighted on-base averages per position. And I don't think there'll be too many surprises here if you follow much baseball. Shortstop and second base are the 2 lowest positions. Catcher is right behind it. Then we get a tier of third base and then outfielders, and then first base is obviously where a lot of your sluggers and big hitters play. And I just referenced that because we're going to talk a little bit later about looking at positions and kind of coming up with a plan for the slate based on positions. And so this is a nice little chart you can reference. At the end of this, if any of you guys want me to email you all these slides, I'd be happy to do so. We'll also be posting this video somewhere here at some point tonight, and so you'll be able to come back and reference that as well. But essentially, when we are in a position where we're looking at WOBA splits, what we're doing is we're looking at a pitcher's WOBA splits and a hitter's WOBA splits, and we're making a hybrid blend. So, again, I don't know how much all of you guys follow baseball, but there are generally statistical advantages when a right-handed hitter goes up against a left-handed pitcher, or a left-handed hitter goes up against a right-handed pitcher. And the basic practical reason is that the way that the ball comes out of the arm and out of the hand is more easily visible when it's coming from away towards the batter than when it's coming from towards to away. When a right-handed batter is up against a right-handed pitcher, the ball is hidden longer, the grip is hidden longer, the arm angle is hidden longer, and it makes it tougher for the batter to pick up what kind of pitch it is, to pick up the velocity, to pick up any break on the pitch. And so generally speaking, hitters have a statistical advantage in those situations. That being said, there are cases all over baseball where right-handed hitters are better against right-handed pitchers than left-handed pitchers, where left-handed pitchers are better against left-handed hitters than right-handed pitchers, so on and so forth. And the statistical blends, if you were to look at the league averages, they're even different. So a right-handed pitcher against a left-handed hitter doesn't have the same advantage as a left-handed pitcher against a right-handed hitter. And lefty against lefty and righty against righty don't have the same numbers. So the bottom line is, even though there are some people today who still, to this day, will look at a lineup and say, I've got a lefty pitcher going, I'm going to load up on righties, and they don't look at anything else, the reality of the situation is the math is much different. And so what we love and what we do here is for every play on a slate, we're actually going in and taking these WOBA splits for the pitcher and the batter based on handedness. And so, if we've got a right-handed pitcher up and we've got left and right-handed batters in the lineup, we're actually taking that pitcher's splits against left-handed batters and against right-handed batters, and then we're taking those batter splits against a right-handed pitcher, and we're blending the two. And then when we blend it, we sprinkle in a little bit of the ballpark factors, and we sprinkle in a little bit of the home-away splits. And what it gives us is it gives us a hybrid WOBA for the specific situation. In that situation, then we take along against the scale and use it to come up with a WOBA score. Hands down, above anything else you do in daily fantasy baseball, this is the most predicative stat there is. And by predicative, I mean predictable. And so this stat will lead you to profitable rosters. This stat will lead you to profitable plays. And what's even more important, again, is because of name, notoriety and how well people know certain players and what they see on TV and people are hot. Even though people have access to these stats and they're available, people will ignore these stats sometimes. In particular, they will ignore the non-shiny object in the corner of the room. Sometimes you will get a play, and I don't say sometimes, it'll happen just about every slate. There'll be one or two plays that people aren't high on because, it's a lefty on lefty lineup, or, it's this player that nobody values or nobody thinks is very good. But sometimes the stars align, and you'll get a left-handed pitcher that struggles with left-handed hitters, and you'll get a left-handed hitter that crushes left-handed pitching, and you'll get a situation where the WOBA is screaming, play this guy, even though on paper or based on how popular that player is or based on how well known he is, it doesn't match up. And this is where you can really start to profit in baseball and start to make money in baseball, is to trust this stat. It's the first stat we have in our dash. It's a hybrid stat that's available in the Datalytics projection. This stat is the one you want to trust. If you were to do nothing else but to sort by hybrid WOBA and play those players on a consistent basis, you're going to make money. Now, you're not going to make a fortune just depending on WOBA, but over the long run, if that is the sole determining factor you use for playing your plays, you will be profitable. And so we highly value this stat. It's a big part of our statistical model. When we do our projection analysis on the analytics side, we're actually reverse engineering the hybrid WOBA against the probability of events in a ballpark to come up with a distribution of what that particular player's likelihood is to hit singles, doubles, triples, and home runs, because we believe in it that much. It's the biggest part of the scale. Any questions on WOBA? Okay, we will keep going here. Regression. This is the second most important stat when it comes to baseball. I started making money and started becoming profitable as a DFS baseball player when I got into WOBA. When I got into regression, it really started to take my play to the next level. What I love about regression, and I'm a regression whore, and I'm going to sell you guys on regression, is that regression takes you to that next level that separates you from all the other people that are smart enough to know that WOBA is a good stat. Now, not every player in DFS knows that WOBA is a good stat, but a decent percentage of people know that WOBA is a good stat. Regression takes it to the next level because what regression does is it helps you understand how much of each stat is based on luck versus based on the actual situation. It's a stat that not many people look at and that not many people listen to. If you read other experts' articles, if you watch expert videos, if you watch some of the shows, listen to some of the podcasts out there, you will see regression referenced occasionally. You will see people talk about it, but they don't pay that much attention to it in the grand scheme of things. It's kind of one of those things that it's like salt. They just throw a little bit on top for a little bit of flavor. And I'm telling you, when it comes to baseball, you should be dumping the salt on your plate. There should be more salt in food because regression will help you find plays that everybody else is completely off the board, completely not looking at, and allow you to really take advantage of them. And because, again, baseball is a high corollary sport, this will allow you to contrarianize your plays excuse me, and separate yourself from the field in ways that you've never been able to before. Just for example, let's just say that a pitcher is in a spot where his raw stats for the year and his success for the year say he's in a really good spot to pitch. And so a lot of guys are going to be on that pitcher. But his regression stats are screaming that he's been extremely lucky, that his production has been way over what it should be, and actually he's due for really strong negative regression. Not only can you fade that pitcher, a pitcher that may be 25, 30, 35% owned, and be in a position where you essentially can, if that pitcher goes down, then 25, 30, 35% of the field is eliminated. But then you can even also go with the correlation play and put some of those hitters in. And now, when that pitcher comes out and throws a dud, now not only is 30% of the field eliminated, but you're on some of the biggest hitters for that day. Regression, I'm telling you, will help you crush the field. There's regression for pitchers and hitters, which is great because both are going to be in situations where that needs to be factored in. And again, yes, this is something, Richard, we've added to the dashboard. We're doing the math for you. We're going to go through the math here in a little bit, and I'm going to explain it to you. But we have actually taken care of this for you because what we want you to do when you come into the dash is come in, take a quick look, and say, hey, this guy, the column on the right, all the way on the right is recent performance. This is how they've been playing lately. Are they hot? Are they cold? But now we're going to give you the context and regression and say, okay, yes, that player's hot, but they've been really lucky. Or yes, that player's really, really cold, but they've been hitting line drives straight at guys. They're hitting the ball really strong. They're hitting with good contact. It's just not landing in the right places in the field. And so you're going to be able to quickly look at this and say, okay, this player's been overperforming or underperforming. Now, how do I add that context to what their matchup looks like today? And is there matchup one today where I want to take that risk based on whether that player is due for the positive or negative regression? So, how do we decide, essentially decide, sorry, go to the right slide here, what regression is? Well, the first stat we're going to look at here is batting average on balls in play, BABIP, okay? The way BABIP works is basically they are taking the percentage of balls that have been hit into fair ground, fair territory. So, foul balls don't count, strikeouts don't count. These are just balls that are in between the foul lines or home runs. and they're taking an average of how many times those balls landed for hits. Obviously, errors don't count for hits, so these are just solid base hits. Why is this important? Well, because over the years, this is a stat that has a consistent average at right around 300. Okay, so if we have a hitter, like let's say 2 weeks into the season, we have a hitter whose BABIP is like 550, and that may sound high, but I promise you it's going to happen. That means that 25% higher than it should be of the time, those balls have been landing in spots on the field where they were base hits. Or on the flip side, let's say you have a guy that gets 2 weeks into the season and the BABIP is like 120, right? He's actually having 18% below what the traditional league average is. Why is this important? Well, because with hitters, you can hit the ball hard all day long, and sometimes the balls are just going to go straight towards the fielders. We've all seen situations where guys just crush the ball, and it goes right at the first baseman, or it goes right at the left fielder. I mean, just rip the cover off of it. At the same time, you have guys that come up there, and a nasty curveball gets thrown, and they chuck the bat at it, and it hits the corner of the bat, and he barely makes contact, and it just bloops into left field and happens to fall, right? So BABIP is kind of giving us this picture of, okay, how lucky is this person being specifically in where the ball lands on the field? And as that BABIP rises above the 300 or rises or falls below the 300, we have an idea of whether those stats are accurate, more luck, or less luck-based. Now, as the season goes on, these numbers obviously are going to dial in more and more. We'll start having BABIP stats and regression stats on basically day 3 because it'll be the first time we'll have players playing in their second game. But even with those stats in play, it's going to take a couple weeks for us to start getting decent sample size. But what we're going to be looking for are hitters who have been extremely lucky or extremely unlucky to help us determine whether we want to continue to play them or fade them on any given basis. Now, hitters do have a higher range of their average BABIP. Not every hitter is exactly at 300. Some of them will range as low as 250. Some of them will range as high as 340, 350. But generally speaking, the average is around 300. So what we will do in our factors is as we're putting this towards our regression score for hitters is we'll weigh it against their career BABIP. We've got career BABIP numbers for each of those players. So we'll weigh it to get a feel for how high or how low they are above that play. And as early as probably about a week into the season, this will start to really paint a picture for us for how players are performing based to their actual performance and determine luck. Does that kind of make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? Cool. BABIP is a stat we will use for pitchers as well. Pitchers have a much more consistent BABIP when it comes to their averages. Almost all of them are right around the 300 mark. One, they get a lot more appearances. Hitters only get 4 hits a game. Pitchers are facing, anywhere from 15 to 25 batters per game. So they have a much higher sample size. That brings that number much more consistent. But same deal. We will be looking... I pronounce it fine. Evan says I don't pronounce BABIP right. He can tell me how he pronounces it. But it's essentially a spot where, because the pitchers even have a more consistent appearances and they have a larger sample size, we're in a spot where we can really tell again if a pitcher has a above average BABIP, then we'll be in a spot where we know that they've had some bad luck, and if they have a below average BABIP, we know they've had some good luck, and it's going to help us determine whether those 3-0 pitchers with a 2.56 ERA in the 3rd week of April are really that good, or if they've just been lucky. Another stat that we're going to look at is xFIP. Now, xFIP is expected fielding independent pitching. What this does is this looks at a whole mess of variables. I didn't even want to put the formula up here, but it is looking at hard hit balls, fly balls, ground balls, and factoring in fielding performance to give you a statistic for a pitcher that's independent of the team's fielding abilities. It's much more accurate than ERA. Because again, we know that ERA can really range widely based on your defense, based on how well your team performs. Now, I understand like there are earned run and unearned run runs, right? So when a pitcher's pitching and there's an error against the team, essentially that error makes sure that future runs that were because of that error don't count against the pitcher. That being said, there's still a whole range of scenarios and outcomes and events that happen in baseball that don't show up as an error that affect a pitcher's scoring. And so, long story short, what's great about xFIP is it's a measuring factor that goes right against ERA. So let's say a pitcher has an ERA of 3.5, but they've got an xFIP of 5.6. Essentially what that's saying is their ERA should be, if all things considered and fielding is not factored in, their ERA should be 5.6. And so in that situation, we again know that that pitcher is due for negative regression to the tune of about 2.5 earned runs. Likewise, if their xFIP is lower than their ERA, then the fielding has actually hurt them in a negative way, and they're actually due for positive regression. This is another one of those stats. I'm telling you guys, I love this stat because you will get in situations, I promise you, 3, 4, 5 weeks, especially into the season, some of the most profitable baseball you can play is late April, early May, where everybody is on the bandwagon of these guys that are starting out 3-0, 4-0, 5-1 pitchers who have low ERAs because that's what they're looking at. Yes, there are sharps and really good baseball DFS players who are members of every major sports projection site. They're reading every article. They're really tuned into things. Those people are out there. But remember, there's a much larger population of people that are playing daily fantasy sports for fun. And I promise you, there are people that are going in there and they're looking at the pitcher's ERA and they're plugging him in. And this is another place where, a pitcher can be in a spot where, yes, hey, they've had good stats, they've had a good season, their recent performance is great, they're going up against a team that's weaker, the WOBA splits kind of say that the team's weaker, but then you go in and you find out that even though their ERA is 2.86, their xFIP is like 7 or 8, and I'm not even exaggerating, those kind of scenarios happen. And those guys are guys you don't want to touch with a 20-foot pole. Those are guys you want to be hitting against. And you will find that not only is the pitchers way over-owned, but the hitters against those pitchers are way under-owned. And so this is a great spot for you to come in and get a much deeper picture of what's going on that other people aren't expecting and aren't aware of. And again, separate yourself from the field. And what I love about the Dash is we're doing the math for you. You don't have to sit there and figure out, wait, is this good regression or bad regression? Is it positive or negative? Am I supposed to fade him in the spot or play him? That can all get crazy confusing, and you can start to play mind games on yourself trying to figure out which side. We take care of it. We're running the math. We're running the situation. When you get into the Dash and you see a player has a regression score of 7, 8, 9, 10, and that's green, you know that player is due for positive regression. We can expect them to be in a better spot than they've been. And when that shows up in that 1, 2, 3, 4 range and it's red or it's orange, you know that player has been extra lucky, that performance is not sustainable, and they're due for some negative regression. We're taking care of the work for you so that very quickly you can look at any given player and say, that's a guy I want. That's a guy I want to fade. Oh, look, this guy's in a good spot, but he's due for negative regression, and he's super popular, so I'm going to fade him. Hey, here's a guy that's due for positive regression. He's got a vibe score of 0. Nobody's on this guy. He makes a great GPP play. So our goal with the regression is to try and take you guys to a place where you guys have the snapshot for every player, and you're able to run with it. Rich is asking if xFIP is a part of the Dash. It is, but what we're doing is we're taking the regression score and we're combining the xFIP and the BABIP to come up with a score for you. So when you see that regression score, let's see, where was it here? I think I've got it back here. When you see this regression score here, this is going to be a combination of BABIP and xFIP. So again, yeah, we're taking care of the work for you so you don't have to worry about it. Any questions on regression other than that? All right, let me get to the dark horse of baseball DFS, which is BVP. Now, you will find people that will tell you that BVP is a really important stat in baseball, and you will get people that tell you it's an absolute waste of time. If you don't know what it is, BVP are basically the batter versus pitcher stats. This is what are the batter's stats against that specific pitcher anytime that those two have dueled. Here's the dilemma with this stat, right? One, there's no context to the stat. Sometimes you will get a guy with 40 at-bats against a pitcher, right? But those 40 at-bats literally came over 12 years. And during that 12 years, that pitcher may have been really good for 4 years and really bad for 8. It may have been that the hitter was really good for a portion of the time and bad. It could be that hitter was on a team where he got to bat against that pitcher in a lot of run-scoring situations where he had protection, where there was no place to walk him, where the pitcher was forced to throw it. But there are tons and tons of situations that you don't get in the context of a batter versus pitcher situation. In addition to that, sometimes we end up in situations where the sample size isn't that great. What do we do when a hitter is 5 for 11 against a pitcher? I mean, that average comes out to 455, which is really, really, really good. But essentially, at the same time, you're kind of in a spot. It's like, well, did he face him 2 times when the pitcher was having a bad day? Was he in the middle of a really big hot streak when he faced him? We don't know. And so I think it's a stat that we want to be aware of, especially because there are people that are extremely over-influenced by it. But it's not necessarily a stat that we want to go all in on. One of the challenges with it is that this stat is somewhat baked into the WOBA. Sometimes a batter has really good BVP splits against a pitcher, not because he's good against that pitcher, but because that pitcher, again, is really good, really bad against that handed batter, and that batter is really good against that handed pitcher. And so you can double dip a little bit by taking, a BVP and say, oh, well, this guy obviously is good because of the BVP. Well, that might already be factored into the WOBA. So when it comes to batter versus pitcher, we do include it. One of the things I'm going to be setting up tonight, the BVP actually factors the sample size in, but I'm going to be setting it up tonight so that when you mouse over BVP, you can actually see the actual statistics. And one of the cool new features for this year that we're doing is we're actually tying the BVP into the WOBA weight. There's actually BVP WOBA now, so that we can, again, get a better feel for not just what was the player's average against that pitcher specifically, but what was his weighted on-base average and how well did he hit for power against this particular player. So as you're using the dash and you're seeing this number, understand that when the sample size is small, the variance between 5 and 10 and 5 and 1 is going to go small. So a guy that's 2 for 3 isn't going to show up as good as a guy that's 16 for 28. But you're going to be able to mouse over. You're going to be able to look at it, and I would say it's a good place to maybe break ties if you're trying to decide between two guys. But again, remember that in baseball more than any other sport, because there's a wider range of plays, we're looking to separate ourselves from the field, especially in tournaments. So you can use BVP for you or against you. You can use it in situations where you can see a guy and he has a BVP of 2. And understand that people are looking at these stats and they're going to say, oh, well, this guy's 2 for 12 against this guy. I'm not playing him. And you're actually going to get him at a lower ownership because he's 2 for 12 than you would have if he was, 8 for 12 against that guy. Now, if a guy's 2 for 46 against a pitcher, probably a safe spot to fade him at that point. Unless, there's some huge change with that hitter's mechanics or something, or you have some strange reason to do it. So there's definitely spots where you can use it, but I like it again because I think it's a bigger indicator of where the crowds are going to go than because the stat's predicated in and of itself. Thoughts on that? Questions on that? Anybody? All right, moving right along. Couple of warnings, and then we'll get into cash and tournament plays. One, don't double dip. All right, you heard me kind of reference this before. There are 581 stats in baseball. And they are people who are in payroll at these companies who their sole goal is to invent new stats every year. Literally. I mean, they are trying to find stats for stats for stats for stats, and it never ends. You have to be careful not to take every single stat you see and try and apply it to your analysis of baseball, because what you're going to end up doing is you're going to take multiple stats that are the same because they're tied to the same core situations and what's happening, and you're going to overinflate or exaggerate your view of a particular player because you're seeing three stats that all look good and saying, well, he must be really good because all three stats is good. And you don't realize that all three stats are just telling you the same thing three times. Part of our vision and passion for the Dash is we don't want to throw 800 stats at you because some of those stats are tying into each other. BVP is tied into WOBA. Hard hit percentage is tied into WOBA. So we don't want to throw so many stats at you when so many of them are similar or telling you similar things and have you be overwhelmed, or also have you exaggerate or blow a particular player's situation out of proportion because you're layering those things. Stick to the basics. Stick to your WOBA, stick to your regression, stick to your recent performance, and you'll be fine. My second warning to you: some stats are overrated, and this is absolutely true. Ballpark stats are probably one of the most inflated stats there are. I'm not saying ballparks don't matter. They do matter. If they didn't matter, then Coors Field would be no different than AT&T Park, and you would approach them the same way and you would play them the same way. Ballparks do matter. But here's a very common mistake people make, right? They go and they look at the games and they look at the Vegas lines and they go make some decisions, or they put a model together, or they analyze based on the Vegas lines, and then they go to ballpark factors and then they do extra analysis for the ballpark factors. Well, guess what? Vegas has already factored the ballpark into the situation. If you look at an over-under for a particular baseball game, they've already, and done it better than we could possibly do it, already factored in how that particular ballpark affects scoring, how it affects runs, how it affects home runs. If you're looking at player props, it's already baked into all that. And so you can very easily go, oh, well, the over-under in this game's a 9. Oh, look, it's in Coors Field. And you put the two together and you're like, well, this is a really good spot. Well, no, Vegas already accounted for that. So, do we factor ballpark statistics into our stats? Some of them yes, some of them no. We actually take our ballpark factors and we only apply them right now to away players. Because again, think about this, and this is another mistake people make, right? If you play for the Colorado Rockies, half your games are already in that ballpark. So if I do a full application of ballpark statistics to that player, guess what I'm doing again? I'm double dipping. I'm double applying the Coors Field effect to that player, and we're getting an exaggerated view of what that ballpark really does to that player. So, there's no doubt that, Coors Field is obviously an outlier too because of the altitude and the thin air and so on and so forth. But sometimes guys will play certain people because the particular stadium they're in has a home run fence that's 5 feet closer to home plate. Now ask yourself, how many times are they hitting balls that are in that 5-foot range? Does it happen during the course of the season? Absolutely. Will somebody in a park that's 5 feet closer hit maybe one or two more home runs during the course of the season? Absolutely. Should you be absolutely deciding the player you play based on 5 feet? No. Especially if the field is overweight on a particular player because of 5 feet. So just please, please, please. I know there's lots of stats. I know stats can be fun. Don't get so caught up in every single stat that you're running away from what's proven and what works. Stats can lie. That's why we're doing the regression thing. In reality, if you wanted to build the perfect statistical model, you never truly could have enough sample size to pull it off because there's so many things that are always changing. And we already said this is the sport with the least amount of variables and the most correlation. And even in this stats can lie. And so we have to go back to what we can trust. And that's why we're so passionate about the WOBA. We're so passionate about the regression stats, because those are the stats that are going to give you the context that some of these other stats aren't telling you. Um, I've seen people get caught up in all kinds of things when it comes to velocity and pitch and break and situation. And you can, honestly, in poker we call it leveling yourself. You can just get to the point where you get so caught up in these tiny little stats that you paint a picture for yourself that you want to see. You start to read between the lines, and it's like when you look at the cloud and you see a dog or you see a fish or whatever. Like you look into the stats and you start to see what you're hoping to find, and you get away from what you're actually what the stats raw data is actually telling you. So stick to what we've got here. And then lastly, trust the eye test. Now I know you guys are not always going to have time to watch baseball, and that's why it's our job to watch baseball. That's why we put the expert comments in the dash. So we're going to be keeping an eye on things and helping you guys with that. But at the end of the day, there are some times where, despite what the stats say, a guy's swing just doesn't look right. Look at Jason Hayward last year, right? Jason Hayward's a guy whose swing was just awful all year last year, and they made the decision halfway through the season. They weren't going to try and mess with it. It was an off-season project. And so he just sucked. And whatever his WOBA splits were, it didn't matter because his swing was horrible. And even through the playoffs, every time he went to the plate, it was just cringeworthy what he was doing. But guess what they did in the offseason? They retooled it. They worked with him. His swing looks a lot better in preseason and spring training. So I'm going to be one of the guys who, even though his last year's stats don't look great, even though some of his WOBA splits are weighed down by his poor performance last year, I'm going to buy in on him early this year when he's cheaper, because I know that he's retooled his swing. And so you are going to want to at least keep an eye on things, whether it's by reading dash, comments, whether it's watching occasional Sports Center. Keep an eye out, keep an eye on the eye test, so that you are just kind of watching for those guys whose mechanics are just a train wreck. Because when a player's pitching or hitting mechanics are off, the stats don't matter. If you're not getting break in your curveball, you're going to get destroyed, no matter what your career WOBA splits are or what your regressions say. So let's get into some conversation here on specific games. Let's start with cash games. Rule number one, when you guys are playing cash games, pitching, right? We talked at the beginning about how baseball is a sport where your hitters are going to be successful 1/3 of the time, right? Well, if you've got an event that 1/3 of the time happens one way and 2/3 of the time happens the other way, you want to be on the 2/3 side, and that's where the pitching is. Because pitchers tend to be successful more often than not, and because of the points you get for strikeouts, this is where you can find your best floors and your safest scoring in all of baseball. So when it comes to cash games, before you even look at hitters, you should be looking at pitchers and saying, what are the two best pitching situations I can put myself in? Or if on FanDuel, what is the one best pitching situation? And lock him in. Don't get funny with it. Don't get tricky with it. Don't, I'm going to fade the obvious stud pitcher on the slate because, I can save 800 and drop that. Don't get fancy with it. You want floor, you want safety, because you're not going to be able to get it as well on the hitting side. Can you reuse regression in cash games? Absolutely. You can. But remember, again, when it comes to not double dipping, Vegas has factors for regression. They do. And so in situations where a pitcher is an obvious favorite, a huge favorite, in a particular situation, and they're in a really safe spot to get a win in a really low-scoring projected game, you don't have to get fancy with it. You don't have to double dip yourself. Drop that guy in. There's always value to be found in baseball. Guys are resting all throughout the year. And the great thing with baseball is lineups are coming out, even nowadays. It used to be 2 hours before lineup lock. You get now sometimes 6, 7, 8 hours, even the night before, lineups will be announced for the next game. And so you've got plenty of time to get a feel for who are the bench guys that are popping in a spot start, who are the guys being called up that are in a great position, what guys are being replaced by injuries. You're going to be able to find the value easier than other sports. So Find your pitchers first, lock your pitchers in, call it a day. Reading Evan's comment here. The devaluation of wins and giving quality starts lesson on FanDuel lessons importance there. Target high strikeout guys in a good spot for sure, especially cash. Absolutely. You're always going to want to find high strikeout guys. It's always dangerous in cash to put a pitcher in who is going to average 2, 3, 4 strikeouts a game, because if not only is he not going to get strikeouts that are going to help higher his floor and help offset any earned runs he give, but the more he doesn't miss bats, the more they're putting the ball in play. And guess what? The more they're putting the ball in play, the more hits they're going to get. And on every site but FanDuel, where you're getting hurt for every hit that they get, it makes it even more critical to have strikeout guys. It makes it more critical to find these guys that can go 6 innings and can get under 4 earned runs. So, bottom line, don't get cute with it. Throw those top guys in, call it a day. The second thing is opportunity, all right? And this can't be stressed enough. Now, remember, we're talking cash games specifically. Who has the most opportunity when it comes to hitters? Guys at the top of the order and guys that are going to get 5 at-bats. Now, can we always predict who's going to get 5 at-bats? No, we cannot always predict who's going to get 5 at-bats. However, when we look at over-unders for Vegas games, the higher over-under games are projected to have more scoring, which is projected to have higher at-bats. On our projections on Datalytics, again, we factor that in to determine how many at-bats we think a player is going to get. That's absolutely in that projection model. And so you can see how much opportunity we expect a player to have. On the Dash side, we're taking a look at those numbers and we're tagging players as cash plays based on the opportunity. This is not the place to get cute and decide that you're going to play a 9-hitter, which you can do in GPPs, but not a place to get cute with a 9-hitter and decide that you're going to put a guy that's last in the lineup in because he's really cheap to punt him, because chances are you're only going to get 3, maybe 4 at-bats with him. And every at-bat helps you overcome the variance of the fact that guys strike out and hit balls to straight at, fielders and everything else. So you want to be at the top of the order. You want to find people who are high on-base percentage guys who have high averages, again, high WOBA splits. And on the Dash side, we're taking care of this for you. On the Datalytics side, this data is in the model. Find these guys. Find opportunities. Evan made a comment, strikeouts are much more predictable too. Absolutely. And when it comes to our strikeouts in our model, again, we're not just looking at general strikeouts. We're looking at strikeout splits. Strikeout splits for the hitter, strikeout splits for the pitcher against handedness. We can get a percentage of the time they strike out, so we're getting a pretty clear picture on that. And on the Dash side for pitchers, so baseball is the first sport where we actually have, let me see if I can pull this up here. Can you guys see the screen okay? Everybody see the screen? So baseball is one of the first stats where on the hitter side, we've got our WOBA, our BVP, our regression stats, and our recent form. For pitchers, we're actually doing the opponent's WOBA, but then we've got a K percentage based on their strikeout potential. We've got the regression stats, and then we've got the likelihood of a win. So you can actually come in here and sort by strikeout potential as a great way to determine essentially which pitchers you want to run after, and just you can literally sort by that strikeout potential and just start there as a great place to start. I'll tell you that must play is one of the most overhyped terms in baseball. Now, on the pitching side, again, there will be some must plays. There will be some obvious times. You'll get your Clayton Kershaws against the Padres or whatever Houston, whatever team is full of scrubs and rebuilding, and there'll be no-brainer spots to play them. But on the hitter side, people will tell you all the time, oh my God, you've got to play Bryce Harper against so-and-so. You've got to play Anthony Rizzo against so-and-so. And that's just not the case. Now, are there guys that are in better spots than others? No doubt. But what you have to be careful about in baseball, especially in cash games, is that the really top guys are overpriced. And you can end up in situations where by paying up for a Mike Trout, by paying up for an Anthony Rizzo, if there isn't enough value, you actually, even though you're gaining value by having that top guy, the value you're losing by having to punt 2 or 3 or 4 positions when there's not very good value actually hurts your overall floor. And remember, we're in a sport where this isn't you're plugging James Harden in and you got a floor of 50 points and you're just hoping that he gets to 60, 70, or even 80. Like, these are guys that on any given day can go 0 for 5. And so be careful, again, on the cash game side about, like, especially high-end priced hitters being must plays. Instead of like going through and saying, like, in basketball, here's the 3 guys I got to have and build my lineup around, what you need to do is you need to make a plan across all positions. And so when I play cash games in baseball, and I do this in tournaments as well too, before I start building rosters, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at a particular position and I'm going to get a feel for how strong or weak that position is. And so if I come back here to my screen, and let's say I pull up catchers first, right? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all my catchers, and I'm going to get a feel for how strong are my plays. And you can see here, we don't have any really solid green plays here. So on the catcher side, there really is not a very strong play. So this is a spot I'm going to be more likely to punt. And then you can come into first base, and you can take a look at all the first base plays and get a feel for how strong they are. Okay, we've got 2 really strong first base plays. Both of them are fairly expensive, so this might be a position I'm going to pay up in. And then I go to second base. And same thing, I'm going to look. Okay, well, everybody's bad but Zobrist, so here's a spot where I probably got to find a place to play Zobrist unless I want to come down here and take higher risk with Castro. And so on and so forth. Run through all your positions and get a feel for where you need to pay up, where you need to pay down, what's safe, what's riskier, and start to figure out like your layout, not even like specifically to player, just figure out like where you're going to spend, where you're going to punt, and use that to start to set your roster up, right? Then you can go in at that point and start to decide, hey, I want to build my roster around these 2 or 3 guys. But understand that if you get that cash roster built and there's 2 or 3 guys that you don't like on your roster, you got to have the determination and persistence and diligence to take a step back and go, okay, I might have to come off of Anthony Rizzo at first base and come down to Goldschmidt, or I might have to come down to my second or third or fourth option so that I can fit guys in at maybe second base, at maybe shortstop, at maybe catcher that I feel better about. One of the worst things you can do in baseball is put 3 guys in at catcher, second base, and shortstop that are almost like guaranteed offers. They're guys that have 200 batting averages and WOBAs that are even worse. And, your ceiling is like, realistically, it's like a single and maybe a walk. And there's a very good chance to go for 4 because you're losing 3 spots. You're losing 3 roster spots on that. You can very easily get 3 zeros from those guys. And now you're counting on 5 guys to make up all the production on that. And in a situation where you're trying to beat 50% of the field, what ends up happening is you get those 5 guys, and yeah, maybe they go off, but guess what? They're high-owned guys, right? And so now you've got zeros from 3 spots, but you got a bunch of guys that are 40, 45% owned. When they go off, you're not really making any ground on the field. And this is a common mistake I see in cash games again and again and again because people do that. They punt 3 positions to a point where there's no chance of them getting a score, and then they're like, well, how did I lose? Like, I don't, like, I had this guy and he hit 2 home runs. Well, yeah, so did everybody else, right? I mean, having Anthony Rizzo hit 2 home runs when he's 54% owned, I mean, do you want him in your lineup? Absolutely. But if the other 2 guys, if the other guys you build around him aren't decent enough to differentiate yourself in the field, you're really not making up that much ground. So what I like to do is I come up with my plan for all the positions, and I'll make a brief note. I'm punting catcher. I'm spinning up at first base. There's really good value at second base. There's good value at outfield. Here's a spot start I'm going to put in all my lineups. and then start to build in from there. And then just be willing to audible or pivot off of some of those top guys if you need to, so that you ultimately have a roster of 8 or 9 guys, depending on the site, that you can feel pretty good about having an opportunity to put up some points, whether it's singles or doubles or stolen bases or power potential. Being in a spot where you can build a roster where you're getting points from 8 guys instead of 5. The only other point I'll make about on the cash games, people will talk about consistency and people will talk about floor. I mean, floor is a really hard statistic in baseball because I think that you can calculate a long-term floor and an average floor, but again, anything can happen in any one game. There's just no guarantee that a guy is going to hit a home run, or that a guy is going to get multiple base hits, or that a guy's even going to, get on base. Sometimes a pitcher will come out and just have the game of his life. Sometimes a hitter will come out and he's, just not there. Sometimes a hitter will go out partying the night before and you have no freaking clue that they were out drinking till 4 a.m. and that doesn't show up in the statistics, right? So, again, you can look at some of those things. You can try and chase guys who have maybe a better batting average but don't quite have as many home runs. But at the end of the day, you're slicing hairs again, and you're really looking at stats that have such a marginal impact. It's not giving you an edge. Just stick to your type WOBA players. Stick to guys that are for positive regression. Obviously, if you can find hot players, baseball is a sport that is very swingy. Guys go through hot patches. They go through cold patches. So that's, again, where with those stats, look for those guys that have high WOBA, high regression, high recent performance, and you're going to be in a good spot. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? All right, moving on. Tournaments. This is where all the fun is in baseball, and this is where if you're playing the sport for fun or to make money, this next 10 minutes is everything to you guys. My best cash was on FanDuel 2 years ago. I won. Well, I tied for first in the $25 Grand Slam for just over $10,000. And it was the most fun night of my entire life. I mean, obviously making money is fun, but I made that roster with a Kansas City Royals stack, and I actually beat out a massive field with 0 home runs. I didn't get a single home run the entire night. Got a bunch of stolen bases, got a bunch of doubles and triples. Kansas City was playing at home. If you guys know Kansas City, it's not a hitter's park. The home run fence is a million miles away. But sweating that throughout the night as Kansas City played that game and put runs on, and how many times there were at-bats that, swung me one way or the other. It was the most fun I've ever had in DFS. And I will tell you right now, you want a place where you can get an edge on people. Baseball is the sport. There's 2 approaches for baseball tournaments. Stacking and non-stacking. Stacking in baseball is basically taking anywhere from 4 to 6 guys, depending on the site and the site rules, from one team and putting them on your team. The reason you do this is because the events are corollary, right? If you have a guy who's on second base and you have a guy that's batting and that guy hits a home run, not only are you getting all the stats for the hitter and his stats and the RBIs, but you're also getting that second baseman's run scored on him. And so you're actually getting even more scoring for various tasks than you would have if you had a guy on second base in one game and a guy at home on the other. So by putting 4 or 5 guys in the same lineup from the same team, when that team goes off for 7, 8, 9, 10 runs, you can rack up fantasy points in a hurry. Just like in basketball, when a guy passes to one guy and he makes a shot, you get the points for the assist and the shot. Same way here. You're using those corollary stats to build a really high score. The challenge with stacking is separating yourself from all the other people that are stacking, and even more importantly, not getting that one dud in your lineup. It's really frustrating when you stack 6 guys and 5 of those guys go off and put up 15, 20, 25 fantasy points, and that 6th guy gets a 0. And so stacking may seem like the quick and easy way to do it. Hey, throw all these teams in. I'm just going to take the top 5 batters, and I'm going to sprinkle in, and that'll be great. But hitting on the right 5 batters can be challenging. And then the other thing is, if let's just say you stack the first 5 batters in a game at Coors, and again they go off. If there's 400 other people who have that same stack, how are you differentiating yourself? So, is there merit to stacking? Absolutely. Is it the only way to play tournaments? Absolutely not. The other way is not stacking. I promise you it happened all last year, and it will happen throughout this year again. You will look at the lineups and the top lineups every night, and you will see stacks and you will see non-stacks. You will see guys who stacked 6 guys and got the right combinations and filled in with the right guys and got a huge score, and you'll see guys that didn't take a single guy from the same team that will get really high scores. So I think at the end of the day, neither method is more profitable than the other. But the advantage you have to non-stacking is you're much less likely to share a combination with somebody else. And so, I mean, without getting too crazy in the math, if you have, 40 guys to choose from, right, and you pick 2 choices, there's, 800, or sorry, I'm not even doing the right math right, 1,600 combinations of that, right? And then if you do 3 players, that runs up to 64,000 combinations. And so when you're not stacking and you're picking separate players, it makes it easier to differentiate yourself from the field. And the key to baseball DFS more than any other sport is really, truly being contrarian. Again, if you have that 35% owned guy and he hits 2 home runs, yes, you're going to have a really high score, but you're going to have it with a guy that's always, or you're going to be sharing that with 35% of the field. So you're not making up as much ground as you think you are. And, what people always look at that and they say is, well, if the guy's 35% owned and he had 2 home runs and I'm not on him, then I'm not going to win. And that's true. But if you're on that guy and he does hit the 35 home runs, you're still not necessarily going to win. You're still going to have to find a way to differentiate yourself from the other 35% of the field that's on that guy. And there was something I learned a long time ago. Al Smizzle brought it up when he's talking about statistics and percent ownership. He said if the percent chance that something's going to happen is lower than the percent of people that are on a guy, then you should be fading him. And sometimes we will see positions where a hitter in baseball is 35, 40, 45, 50% owned, and there's no way in hell 50% of the time he's putting up 25, 30 fantasy point performance, which is what you really need from him to win GPPs. And so, there are just situations where, a guy's going to be really high owned. You got to fade him. If he goes off, he goes off. And if you're building multiple lineups, then throw him in a couple if you want to protect yourself in that way. But you're never, ever, ever going to win a GPP by having a 35% owned guy that goes off in baseball specifically. Where you're going to win is when you can get that 1% guy or that 2% guy that hits 2 home runs and nobody's on him. That's where you get a huge advantage. And unlike other sports, again, where the percentage of the field that can be the top of the game is really small. I mean, on an NBA full slate, there's 8 guys or 10 guys a majority of the time who can really be the highest fantasy point getter on the slate. In baseball, it's like 80% of the field, right? A majority of the field can have one of those days where somebody hits 2 home runs. And so it's way more spread out. And so it pays way more to align yourself against the field, align yourself against the popular plays, align yourself against, because you do have much more of a chance of hitting on those guys. That's where our vibe is so key. If you don't know about our vibe, the way that the vibe works is we go out and we have a system that goes out and it scrapes articles and it reads strategy guides and strategy articles and people's picks, and it goes through Twitter, and basically it's building a map of how much these players are being talked about for a given slate. And then based on that, we give it a vibe rating from 5 stars down to 0 stars. 5 stars being they're talking about them a lot, 0 stars meaning nobody's talking about them. And so if I come back over here to the dash for tomorrow and I pull up all the hitters, and I'm going to go ahead and sort by vibe here. It didn't work. I'll have to fix that. So let's just look here, right? The highest vibe player right now is Anthony Rizzo. And there's a good reason Anthony Rizzo's a high vibe player. He's a guy that doesn't strike out very often against guys like Carlos Martinez. He's got good VPP against him. He's in a great spot from a split standpoint. It's a very short slate, and so the number of guys that are in good spots is really limited. And everybody's got their number one pitchers going tomorrow, right? So it's a spot where there's just not very many hitters in good situations. So everybody's going to be on Anthony Rizzo tomorrow. If you're playing, honestly, I'll tell you right now, you probably shouldn't be playing much of anything tomorrow anyway. Tomorrow is an absolutely garbage slate. It's a great place to kind of test the system out and get your feet wet. Please don't play for like hundreds of dollars tomorrow. But if you were going to play in tournaments tomorrow, I'd absolutely tell you to fade him. Because, especially on a short slate of 3 games, this is a guy that could be 60% owned. And if he goes 0 for 5, look, you have a huge advantage over the field. There are other plays. Jacoby Ellsbury is a guy that not very many people are talking about. Okay, his BPP for tomorrow, I believe, is like 19 for 35. Against Archer, he's absolutely crushed Archer. And again, some of that's baked into the WOBA splits. Some of that's baked into the experience that he's had playing against Tampa Bay. They play each other many times per year. So a lot of those at-bats are coming, over the last few years. He's in a decent spot that nobody's talking about. He's also cheaper. So these are the kind of guys that I would absolutely load up on in tournaments tomorrow if I was playing for tons and tons of money, because I'm looking for that guy that's, maybe he's going to be 6 or 7% owned. Now that he's batting 5th in the lineup and he's not that, stolen base guy at the top of the lineup that he used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago, he's not as popular. People aren't as big on him. But guess what? Batting 5th, he's going to have RBI potential. So using these vibe scores to get a feel for, no surprise, Jason Hayward, nobody's talking about him. Why? Because he was absolutely garbage last year. But again, he's a guy that's had some BVP success against C-Mart, and he's a guy that has retooled his swing. He's a guy you can throw in for tournaments. I would actually use him for cash games tomorrow, even so, because of how cheap he is and the discount you're getting compared to other players. So this vibe score is going to be a great way for you to quickly look in. And I mean, again, you can come to the top, and this will be much more, obvious when we're playing on a full slate and there's hundreds of hitters. But you're going to be able to come to the top and look at the top rankings and very quickly look and see, who are the guys that aren't being talked about, and get exposure to them. So Richard's asking, how do we get the final rank for the system? Does the system make the stars, or do you guys? On the vibe score specifically, the system's doing it. We're basically allowing the system to give weights to each article based on how popular they are. So articles that are viewed by lots of people get more weight. Articles that aren't viewed by very many people get less weight. And it's basically scoring it by how much influence we think it has over the DFS community as a whole. On the rank, the overall rank score there, that's an average of what our experts are rating the players at. And that's a subjective score based on how good we feel that play is for a given day. Bottom line is, find ways to differentiate yourself from the field. Don't be afraid to take those fades and risks. I know it's scary. I mean, it's scary in any sport when a guy is chalk and you fade him. It's just one of those things that's hard to do in GPPs. But in baseball, more than every sport, you can have more confidence fading a hitter in a good spot than you can in any other sport. If you can't do it here, you can't do it anywhere. Get good at it early. Look for the guys that are in good spots nobody's talking about. Run them out with confidence in tournaments, and it will help you get to the top of the leaderboards much, much faster. And the last point I'll make with this, and this is another huge one, especially for you multi-entry guys, align your lineups to field size, right? This is one of the great places. We talk about playing all the bases, right? And I know not everybody has a big bankroll and can afford to play lots of lineups, but even if you're playing, small ball tournaments, you've got 4 different sites with 4 different field sizes. When you get into Monday, like Monday's slate, and you've got, we'll just take morning slate. There's 6 games on most of the morning slates. So you got 12 teams to choose from. Don't be afraid to decide that you're going to stack all 12 teams. take the top 3 chalk teams that are the most obvious teams. They're the highest Vegas favorites, and throw those in your single entry tournaments and your small field tournaments on small sites. Then take your next 3 tiers and throw them in your medium-sized fields. And then take those bottom 6 teams, and you don't have to play all 6 of them, but take the guys that are the longest shots to go off and put those in your large field tournaments. Because what you're essentially doing is you're varying the potential for that particular team to go off with the reward of what you get. If you head into tomorrow and you're like, I've got to play tournaments and I've got to play Anthony Rizzo, okay. Play Anthony Rizzo in the tournaments where you're in a single entry with 150 people. And the ability to differentiate yourself from those 150 people is not hard. If you play Anthony Rizzo tomorrow in a tournament that's got 117,000 entries, good freaking luck, right? Because all you've done is, if he does go off again, you've put yourself into a 60,000 person field. But say you take Anthony Rizzo and you pull him out and you put in that 5% owned guy and he goes off, now you're beating 95% of the field. Now you're already positioning yourself in the top 5%, and you're putting yourself in a position to win tournaments. So if you're playing multi-entries, I really encourage you, use the vibe score and, take your 5-star and 4.5-star plays and use them in your smallest fields, and then take your 3.5 and 4-star plays and move them in bigger fields, and move your way down, and then take your Jacoby Ellsbury's and your Jason Haywards, play those in their massive field entry tournaments. And I can tell you this can work, and the best way I can tell you this can work is a few years back, Roto Grinders, and they may still do it now, but I haven't paid attention, but they used to do a low ball contest when Alice Mizzle was there, and they would do a little free contest, and what you would do is you would try and pick players that were going to perform the worst. Your goal was to get the lowest score possible, and they had rules to make sure you couldn't cheat. Like, you had to have a guy that was starting and was going to get 4 at-bats and blah, blah, blah. But they would play this contest, right? And they'd get, hundreds and hundreds of entries of people picking hitters in bad spots, hitters that were low-owned. And inevitably, almost every week they did this, somebody would get a score that would win one of the big field tournaments. And in fact, there were a couple of guys who won big money by taking their low ball team, throwing it in a huge field tournament. They had a bunch of 1% and 2% owned guys, and when 3 or 4 of those guys went off for a home run, 2 home runs that nobody was on, they ended up winning big money. Now, I'm not suggesting you go to your big field tournaments and dump a bunch of entries with just a bunch of duds that you shouldn't be playing, but there is simple math that says, again, when you can be on the guy that is the highest scoring player at 1 or 2%, you have just taken a massive field and eliminated thousands and thousands of entries that you're competing against. So, again, that's why we've got this set up the way it is. It's so easy visually to come in here and, again, just look and say, what's the difference? I'm looking for really big stars over here and not very many stars over here. And in my cash games, I can look for those guys that are safer plays and fit them in. The night that I won on FanDuel, I had multiple plays that were under 5%. I had a play at 2%. I had a couple 15% guys. And one of the guys that helped me win was a 9-hitter. Again, would I take a 9-hitter in cash? No, absolutely not. Should you be loading up on 9-hitters on a regular basis? No, you're going to have less opportunity. But in this particular situation, being an American League team, being in a situation where I knew that 9-hitter was going to get on base, had a lot of stolen base potential, and had a lot of chance to be knocked in by those top 3 hitters, I wanted to do it to differentiate myself from people that might be stacking that team, with additional 1, 2, 3, 4, and it paid off for me. That guy ended up with 3 stolen bases, some multiple earned runs, and it propelled me to the top of the lineup because he was super low owned. So experiment with this, have fun with it, gamble with it, take chances with it, and as you do, you're going to find yourself more and more in that position where you are 1 home run away or 1 double away from taking down a big GPP. And the more times you get yourself in that position, it's only a matter of time before you finally get that hit, you finally get that home run, you finally get what you need to propel you to the top. So don't get discouraged if you keep getting close and you just don't quite get there. It's not about winning that particular contest. It's about continually putting yourself in that position knowing that sooner or later that your horse is going to come through. So I'm going to open this up for any questions or comments that you guys have, any thoughts you have over general DFS baseball. And then once you guys are done with questions, I got a quick survey for you guys to fill out. We'll be on our way. You guys are typing some questions while you're waiting. Okay, so first question is, let's say there's a late scratch. How will you guys tell us with the alerts? So in the system, come back over here. Up here at the top here, there is this little baseball icon that's green right now. Essentially, anytime that there are lineup updates that affect baseball and we put them in, that number will turn red. You can see for NASCAR up here, I've already got 7 alerts. If I were to click that NASCAR alert, it'll pop up here, and the NASCAR alerts will load. It's going to load a little bit slow because I've got all this recording software and everything else going. And you can actually see what the alerts are and updates are. So, as late scratches do happen, which please keep in mind, this isn't NBA. Like, it's really, really rare that a guy gets scratched after lineups have come out. But when they do happen, we'll update them and they'll show up in the alerts here. The other thing is we've tied weather and lineup information into the dash automatically. And so right now you can't see it because it's not tomorrow, but on the day of a specific slate, you're actually going to get a weather icon up here that'll give you an idea of the weather. And once a guy is confirmed in the lineup, his numbers are actually going to show up here, and that's fully automated. Currently, the players that are showing up in here are the players that are projected to start or that have been put in the starting lineup. So if a guy's not projected to start or he's not in the starting lineup, he doesn't even show up in the dash. Because again, we don't want to show you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plays that distract you if they're not even guys that you should be considering. So when you come in tomorrow, you'll get updates for both of those things, and you'll be able to see which players are confirmed in the lineup versus which ones are projected. Next question: will the rankings update with that? So let's say that someone comes in, could be a good value. Will you put that person in and rank him accordingly? Yes, absolutely. As plays change, we'll be updating the dash in real time, so you'll be able to see that. And we'll also be doing, although we won't start out doing it every day, we will be doing webinars at least once or twice a week. We'll be doing lineup builder shows, and leading up to a lineup lock, we'll come in here and instead of doing all the slides and stuff, we'll just pull this up and I'll go through how I'm doing my exposure and how I'm building things and how I'm approaching a particular slate. All right, guys, thank you so much. There's a quick little poll here if you want. If not, no worries. The dash is tied into the display now. You guys can go in there and check it. We're still working on the roster building side of things, and we'll be bringing that up throughout the week. But feel free to go in there and check out the plays. We'll be updating those regularly, and everybody's got free access through the next week. So take advantage of it, guys. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to me at DFS Today on Twitter, or send me an email at indymojorob, INDYMOJOROB @gmail.com. And here's to a winning season, guys. Let's make some money and enjoy baseball doing it. Thanks again, guys.